Well, I'm George Wesley, a native of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Uh, I became aware of Oklahoma because I had relatives who lived here and that sort of thing. Back in the 60s, I was teaching at Grambling State University in Louisiana. And time rolled around for a sabbatical, and I thought that Oklahoma had a pretty nice school in broadcasting and that sort of thing. So I took a year's leave. That was about 1968, I believe. Well, in one class that I took that year, I had to do an internship and was assigned to Channel 4, WKY-TV. That was really exciting for me because I had said one of these days I'm going to stop teaching and I'm going to go into commercial television. Didn't know what I'd be doing, but I'd be there. On this assignment, I was working on stage, running camera, and doing all those other things that they think of you to do. But I really enjoyed it, and I did that for a semester, and at the end of the semester, they asked if I would be interested in working in the evenings. And that worked out fine. I'd come in about 5 o'clock for the 5 o'clock news and worked through the 10 o'clock. That provided some interesting situations. I remember Jack Ogle was doing the news one night, and the director asked if he had any water down there because he was having a little difficulty speaking and maybe he was coughing. And I decided that I would try to look around there and see, and lo and behold, I popped up on camera. I don't think anybody will ever forget that, but that was my first time on camera at Channel 4. We did do some remotes. For one I remember particularly was at St. Luke Methodist Church. So we had to take all of the equipment over there, and during that time there were early day equipment, and so we had to do the cameras and set them up over there and all that other stuff. There was no package deal like they eventually developed. That was a challenge for us. We did wrestling with Danny Williams and the wrestlers, and the people would come in every Saturday evening. They would be out on the lawn of the station waiting to get in there, and they would I won't say savages, but boy, they were really excited about coming in. And you don't talk about any rigging of the wrestling match or anything like that because they would jump on you. But we had to set up the ring and do the shooting throughout the match. That was very interesting. I learned a lot about people during that time. They were a wild bunch. Well, later, or I guess all along, I was involved in the process of developing a documentary that the station had decided to do on the history of blacks in Oklahoma. Bob Dotson and Oliver Murray were the two people who at the time were most involved in it. Oliver was doing the shooting and Bob was the producer, director, and that sort of thing. And I think that was one of my greatest thrills when I came to be involved in that, because we learned a lot about Oklahoma and what the blacks did, how they were involved, and outstanding people that a lot of people never knew about. It turned out to be a very interesting piece because, as everybody knows by now, that Bob Dodson is a tremendous writer, producer, to the point that that documentary, Through the Looking Glass Darkly, won a national Emmy. And of course, we were pretty excited about it. At the presentation, the station got one Emmy. And I'm thinking, those of us that they've been promoting as producers of this, shouldn't we have an Emmy? You know, that's selfishness, you know, you just want to have one. So they petitioned the board to see if that was possible. And since that time, producers have received Emmys. Because I said, well, if we got one Emmy, and I tell my grandkids that I was on a team that won an Emmy, will I have to send them over to the station and let them see it there? I think producers ought to have them. And they finally decided to do that. I still have it. I don't think about it as much now as I did back then, but that was very exciting at the time. As I said, when I was at Oklahoma, at the University of Oklahoma, and did the internship at Channel 4, I was on sabbatical leave and had the responsibility of returning to Grambling State University, which I did. And at the time, I was building a radio station there on campus because they didn't have any facilities or anything. We thought it was pretty much like, well, it would be something like this and something like that. Well, because I had been at Channel 4, and at the time it was WKY Radio TV, and some remodeling was going on, and I was able to inherit some of the old equipment, which, you know, to us it was a pretty good deal down there in Louisiana. And communicating about that and coming back and forth, I was approached about coming back to work, and that sounded pretty good. And I decided, yeah, that's what I want to do, is to go back and work full time at Channel 4. It was at that time that it began to really get involved in developing that documentary. When I made the decision to leave Grambling and come to Channel 4, I came as public service director and production of a show called Breakaway, which was focused primarily on minority programming. I was host of that program. It aired every Saturday, and it was a lot of fun. We later went into a broader concept, which included Roy Ramirez as a member of the Hispanic community, and Jerome Bushyhead, pretty well-known artist, was represented the Native American community, and that worked out pretty good. Later on, I became community relations director, which meant that I would go out into the community and address some of the concerns that people had. Many times in relation to public service program. We used to do a lot of public service announcements and that sort of thing following up on that, many times I would work with these communities to enhance what they were trying to do. One interesting thing was when I was sharing an office with Don Wallace. It was a small office, and we sort of had back-to-back desks. And right next to us was the editing room for the documentary as we worked on it. And Bob Dodson was housed up in there, so it gave me access to do that, to work along with that. But Don Wallace was one of the more colorful people. If this was not going out over there someplace, I would probably tell you some of the things, but I won't do that. Let's just say that Don was a very colorful, friendly person. I guess that's why his show was great, because he seemed to have been the greatest fisherman in the states of Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and anywhere else. As you watch the show, that's the way it came across. Bob Dodson, of course, is one of the more interesting and artistic people, and we got to be very good friends working up there. Even until today, he's one of the people that I consider a very good friend. There were people in various offices that many I don't recall their names, but one thing I do remember, worked along with Oliver Murray in shooting the documentary and news stories and that sort of thing. He's very good. But Oliver was an interesting person who challenged the general manager, Bagwell, about the dining area in the station not being appropriate to the black employees. And Mr. Bagwell, a former FBI agent, went down one day and made some adjustments in the snack room, snack bar, whatever you call it. And then he sent for Oliver. Of course, Oliver was probably a little nervous about that, and sent for him to go down to the snack bar, and where Mr. Bagwell showed him the concession machine, and he had put watermelon in it. That was colorful. But anyway, that's Oliver, and of course it was also Oliver, I might add, who challenged the station about doing programs for the black community, and which ultimately led to the development of Through the Looking Glass Darkly. At the time, Oliver was a frail little veteran who could shoot very good footage. He's no longer that frail. Oliver is a lot more of a man than he was then. Avoirdupois. I mentioned the coffee shop earlier, and I recall Imogene and Ernestine were two ladies who cooked every day a hot meal that we had for lunch. They were interesting people in their own right. Imogene was a great smoker. Ernestine was a very firm person who you couldn't run over her, And I guess in both those occasions they didn't take any stuff off anybody. But that was good. I think of people like Bill Thrash, who was program manager for the station. Young guy from down at Ada, who did real well, which is really was typical of most of the people at Channel 4. They were just folk, but they were very skillful in what they did and how they did it. After all, WKY was one of the first television stations west of the Mississippi, close to the Mississippi anyway, and was really a leader, not just some little mini operational situation, but a real firm quality producing station. And I'm just happy to have been a part of it and to have known the many people who I can't remember all the names right now, but Joe Jerkins, for instance, is the name that comes up. And Lee Allen Smith, how could we forget Lee Allen Smith? Lee Allen, of course, was not only involved and eventually became general manager of television. He had been over in radio, but he was very active and supportive of the community of Oklahoma City. As a matter of fact, I think he's still involved, a very significant person in the community. Billie Jean Valbright. We had our own printing press, and Billie Jean ran anything that we needed. She would even produce a handbook of employees back at that time, and we got to know each other and what we were. Charlene, she got the log out, and no sweat. It's just people doing their jobs and enjoying them. There's one thing about Channel 4. Channel 4 was a family, and we thought of ourselves as a family and looked out for each other and the operation of the station. I'm really proud to have been a part of WKY. And that family relationship has endured until today. Right now, every second Monday, they meet at Luby's, and the number, I guess, will continue to grow for people who are around, who are happy to be a part of each other. And that's what Channel 4, WKY, was all about. And I'm happy to have been a part of that.